and see if we can make some magic.
We will make magic.
Let's see that we're live. So hello, everybody. I am so glad to be back with you again with another beautiful guest. I am so blessed to be able to do these interviews because it's always mind-blowing. It's always really fun, and there's always some good takeaway. And we're always growing, right? So with that being said, Kori, I am so excited to have you here. And before I forget, let's get an introduction because otherwise I'll jump right into the conversation. So tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into the imposter syndrome that we're going to talk about today.
Perfect. Hello, everyone, and thank you so much to Jennifer for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here and to share some of what the work that I do and, you know, how it complements a lot of what Jennifer's doing with you all and the work that you all have been exposed to through her magic. So I work with coaches and therapists and consultants and really guiding them to bring out more of their unique skills and gifts and personality traits. And a lot of times these are hidden to us. And a lot of times this is what causes the imposter syndrome, is that we have an idea that we need to show up a certain way in our business that is not really who we are. And then we don't feel all that effective or authentic in what we're doing. And it comes in people are seeing you, your clients are seeing you, which makes sales much more difficult. So it's helping them really tune into really, you know, a deeper level of their self-expression and their purpose. And then we do that also through how that comes through in their writing. So I also guide them with their writing and really calling out their clients to come to them and to share their story in a way that connects with their clients on an emotional level, and also guiding them to share the logic behind the work that they do. Because we, you know, as you know, coaches in the transformational space, you know, we want to make sure that our clients are making an empowered decision to work with us, not just an impulsive decision to work with us. We want them to feel confident and that they're going to get the support they require. And so part of that is bringing in, you know, not just the emotional impulsive decision, it's bringing the logical and intellect with how they're sharing their story in the process of transformation. So, and that also, of course, helps getting rid of imposter syndrome, which we're going to dive into today.
Right. So it's so funny how I loved whenever we first connected and we were talking about having you on, how we connected. I was like, oh my gosh, I love the work that you're doing, because I love when I see other women speaking similar things in different ways, right? Because I feel like we all learn in so many different ways. And so the more we hear it in all different ways, the better our brain can actually be receptive to it. And one of the things, obviously, like I'm a spiritual coach. And so everybody's like, why do you do so much mindset work? I'm like, because it's spiritual. If you're not doing the mindset work along with the spiritual stuff, whatever you're experiencing on whatever level it is, whether it's personal or spiritual or in your business or in your relationships, you have to know the way that your brain works and how that imposter syndrome can show up in so many different ways. So I love that, that we kind of melded on that. Like that was like, okay, this is going to be an awesome conversation. And so we didn't talk a lot about it because I wanted it to kind of organically unfold as we go into the conversation today. So really quickly, before I forget, I see some people that are watching. Hello, everybody. Remember that while we're doing this live, you're welcome to ask questions. You can post your comments or questions and I will see those. So just say hi, let us know that you're here. Thanks for joining us today. One of the things that we really kind of hit on was the trendy labels. And I remember kind of talking about this with you because I'm like, that's one of the things, like, I kind of tend to be like, no BS, and this is just what it is, and take it or leave it, because I don't do sales, so to speak, on that. Like, here, this is a catchy title, so you need this. And I love what you were just saying about making an empowered decision versus just an emotional decision. So I would love if you could go into that just a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, part of, you know, I think diving in a little bit of why imposter syndrome surfaces is we all have this desire, of course, to belong and to be accepted and approved of. And so we pick up on different things throughout our upbringing and childhood and even adulthood, where we start to make rules for ourselves of what's appropriate and how to show up and what we can say and what we can't say and how we have to dress and how we have to title ourselves. And when you show up that way, it doesn't feel, you know, people can pick up on energy. You're a spiritual mentor. It's like people know that that's not really who you are. And so if you are connecting with someone in a way that's not who you really are, a lot of times then you start to use those more like shiny object type of marketing and, wanting people to make an impulsive decision and, throwing all these things at them about what they're going to get, instead of really connecting on a deeper level of what is true about you so that they can see themselves in you. And they can also, you're sharing from a more empowered place about, this is how I discovered, the tools that I use. This is how I discovered the steps that I guide my clients through. This is why they work. Here's the psychology behind it. Here's the research behind it. It's not just like, hey, great, I have this fancy car and this fancy house, and you should hire me because you can have a fancy car and a fancy house too. You can tell my voice changed, right?
I love that.
Because of course that's like the, sort of, if you in psychology speak, right? It's stimulus response behavior.
Right.
And then if that doesn't necessarily invite them into changing that behavior, they're going to repeat that pattern in their marketing. And so you're repeating this pattern of people showing up in a very inauthentic way and not getting true transformation. Because like you said, true transformation is, it's mind level, it's spirit, it's body, it's also the heart. And your heart knows when you're out of resonance with who you are. And that's what needs to change and how you show up. And that allows you, when you can connect to that deeper level, to show up in a way that feels authentic and safe and true. And then your clients pick up on that. So they feel like they can be true. It's safe for them to take off, whatever they think they need and just be who they truly are meant to be and serve in that way, which is really sometimes scary.
I was just going to say, I think it's so scary to just be you. Like, you know what I mean? Like everybody's like, the whole thing being thrown out right now is, the authenticity and being in your own whatever and yada, yada, all the trendy titles, like we were just saying. And it is scary in the beginning to really authentically show up as who you are. And then obviously as we progress, like the changes that go with that. And I know I've seen just in the short time that we've kind of been connected, some transitions for you in your business. But one of the things that I feel like I'm really called to do, especially here lately, like this has been a transition for me probably in the last 6 months or so, really stepping into bringing out more women to step into their authenticity and do the work that they are called to do, because that helps more women. So how did this whole thing, like, I know for me personally, it was the whole Christian psychic thing, like being able to say that out loud was terrifying, right?
Totally.
The more that I worked with the fear, the more I got through it. Though, I mean, it still shows up. That's the other thing too, is it always still shows up. But when you start to show up even more with your own truth, you're empowered then to be who you are, and then also help others with exactly what they're going through and where they're at.
Right.
But I feel like there's this huge call in the last, I felt it about 6 months ago. And again, now I feel like there's this really big universal support pushing us up into really stepping into the next level of who we are. And for a lot of us, that shows up in our business, right? Because a lot of us that are watching this are probably entrepreneurs or whatever, but it can show up no matter what it is. Like, even if you're at a quote unquote regular job and you're in an office or whatever, the more you become authentically you, the more you succeed in your job, the more promotions that you get, the more raises you find, like all of that happens. So like, how did you get into the business that you have now? And how did that feel for you? Because I feel like the more we share, like the more I share, like, this is scary, the more women are like, oh my God, I'm so glad to hear you say that.
Totally. And part of it too is a lot of times we don't know, right? We can't see our own blind spots. So we, and this is kind of part of the issue, right? We think we're showing up authentically, but we're not, and we don't even realize it. So because there's these deep patterns, of course, in our brain about what survival looks like. And if, you're going to get killed for being a Christian psychic or a mystic, then you're not going to understand why you're not showing up that way. Does that make sense? So it's like being able to go deeper in helping, you do this too with your clients, help them go deeper into, it's not just like the surface level fear of failure. It's much deeper healing that needs to happen to come through, because you want to be able to come through, I don't like the word authenticity anymore either, because it's
been overused.
Yeah. But be able to come through as, what God called you to do, or like what was written on your heart even before you were born, like be able to come through and from a very grounded, secure place. And that that means you have to go into, all those subconscious patterns, which you can see the patterns in your behavior, but you don't always understand the deeper reason for the patterns. It's easy to be like, oh, I'm just afraid of failure. Oh, I'm just afraid of success. But when you go deeper into the healing, then when you show up, it's from a very different place. It's from a very secure, this is what I'm meant to do. And if that means, that means I am willing to die for it. And and I'm not afraid.
Yeah.
So it's being able to confront the fear first, but then see that the fear no longer has, this is what you're called to do. And that people that are called to do things usually have to face great challenges in order to do that, right? But that makes you come from a very different place than like having to prove that you're okay, or prove that you're going to be successful, or prove your worth. It's like you already know your worth is inherent in what was written on your soul before you were born, so to speak, right? I don't know if I answered your question, but
yeah, it's okay. So let's absolutely yes to everything you just said. We'll just go there. And then I think what I wanted
my story,
to ask too is
Yeah.
like your story, like how did you get to what you're doing now?
Mhm.
Because I think, again, like I feel like the more of us as women that can show up and say, look, I know that society says XYZ, you go to you go to school, you go to college, you get the degree, you do the job, the yada, yada, yada. That's falling apart in every single way. It's just not, I mean, there are certain things that you do have to do that for now, but so many people are really learning what it means to step into their heart center and follow their passion. And it looks so much different than everything we've been raised with. And how that's kind of shifting. So I'm just curious, like, just if you could share your story of how you got into what you're doing. To let others know that they can do that as well.
So I think, I think part of it is like when we do deeper work, you start to see like it's been there all along. So I started studying, I think I might have shared this with you before. I started studying psychology as a teenager. This is for all y'all that are our age. There was no internet when I started. So I had to go to like the library and look in like the Dewey Decimal System for books. So because at that age, I was in my teens and I started noticing certain behaviors in me. And instead of me I'm maybe a normal teenager, just perpetuating the pattern, I became super fascinated and curious and understanding sort of from an objective view, this behavior doesn't seem natural. It might be normal. I mean, I was like, had an eating disorder. It might be normal because that's what's happening, but I know it's not natural. And so I wanted to understand why was I acting against my own best interest and, being, for starving myself or, making myself throw up. So that, started my path of, on this journey of personal development, but on a deeper level, like wanting to really understand what was going on in my brain. Again, it was like, for me, like, why am I attacking myself? Like, that's pretty unnatural for, it doesn't really, that's not really, we're as human beings, we're supposed to be, on a path of, progression and thriving and evolution. But if I'm, on a path of destruction, there's something going on that I want to understand so that I can change it. And that led me to pursue, psychology in my undergrad, because again, it was just like, I wanted to understand, and I wanted to be able to help people who were noticing some patterns of behavior that were counter to their best intentions, right? So this shows up obviously in entrepreneurship, it shows up in careers, it shows up in relationships, it shows up in, addictive behaviors. So that led me, that first incident of my own experience of battling myself put me on this path of wanting to help others and have a better understanding of why they're doing it. So getting rid of the shame and the blame. And, I used to think, I was just cursed and something was wrong with my pattern came from a deep rooted belief that something was just wrong with me. It didn't matter how many degrees I got, how much money I made, how many boyfriends I had, how thin I was. It was like, I inherently something was wrong with me. And so being able to get to the root of that through deep healing for years and research, to see there is nothing wrong with me. And then to help others see, there is nothing wrong with you. There might be some challenges you're facing, but getting rid of that pattern has to come from a deeper level of understanding, part of what I see too is a part of our gifts come from that wounding, right? And so that set me on a path to want to be able to help others in their path of healing and transformation. And I think if I hadn't had that wounding, I would have been on a very different path, right? I wouldn't have pursued psychology. I wouldn't have pursued coaching, and I wouldn't pursue, I have my master's in communication. And so like it almost like is like the inciting moment, so to speak, of like, okay, this is now what you're going to do because of this. And so you start to see it's not this bad thing anymore. You start to see how amazing this wounding was because it equips you in such a different way than if you hadn't had that experience.
And then how do you work with clients now?
Yes, good question. So now it's funny because it's similar. So we look at, so many of the coaches and consultants and therapists I work with, they come with a pattern of similar, like working against themselves. So it shows up as, either working all the time and not having the level of sales that they want, or the types of clients they want, having kind of client relationship issues, or noticing they're working all the time. So they're having, issues in their partner relationships or family relationships. So there is a pattern that's happening. So we get deeper into, where does this pattern originate? And then what is the story that you believed about the pattern, a deeper story, and then start to see how that pattern wounding puts you on a specific path and equips you to coach in the way that you do, or, be a therapist in the way that you are a therapist. So that then you start to remove this negative, sort of attachment to the pattern and start to see the benefit. And then you can share the story in a very different way, a story of empowerment and a story of how now you can guide others in their path of empowerment and transformation. And what happens is then it really shifts how you see yourself, right? So you are coming from a more grounded, sort of authentic space, because there is no running away from a wound. It's now seeing the wound as actually part of you, and you sharing in a positive way allows you to come across differently, because you're sort of, you kind of think of like the soldiers that have been through battle. They are very different afterwards. They see themselves very differently. They see their courage. They see their resilience. They see, their strength, and that comes through in how they interact with people, right? So that's the same. It's like you start to see yourself differently, and that comes through in how you show up in your business. So you no longer need to like wear a mask, and you don't feel like an imposter because you're like, hey, I'm bearing it all. This is this is what I went through, and this is what I learned, and this is how I can help you go, get to something different in your life and your, in your business and in your relationship with your partner and clients and sales and money. Really, it's really changing your relationship with yourself, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And there's so much beauty in that too, because when you can finally understand, like you were talking about going for all of the degrees and all the certificate, like, everybody does all the things. We're constantly looking outside of ourselves for validation, the degrees, the training, the certifications, the whatever we've learned, like all of the things outside that really gives confirmation, when really, I think what so many of us are being called to awaken to, and like for me, this has been, it seems like it goes in waves. My guides just said the other day, there's like a new wave of awakening. So it's like the next level of everybody waking up will be coming in. And it's like just knowing that everything's okay, just the way you are, and helping people learn to operate from that heart space, the heart center. Yeah. And like you were saying, what's been written on your heart, like I call that our divine spark. Like we all have a divine spark. So when you can connect to that and then ignite it, you can become powerful in whatever it is you're called to. I do see some people still watching. So don't forget, guys, if you have questions or comments, you can definitely, I've got a couple of people saying hello, good morning. Yay. I'm so glad you're here, or afternoon. I don't even know what time it is anymore. But if you guys have questions or comments, let us know. One of the other things that you and I actually really talked about is really focusing on what you want. And it's so funny because my first book, that's really like, it's all about what are you thinking and what do you actually want? One of the things that I find a lot of times with people is they'll say, well, I don't even know what I want, because like as women, a lot of times we don't even know in the very beginning, right? If we go to the very beginning of when we're first waking up, they're like, I don't even know what I want. And then you can start getting into, okay, now I know what I want, but now I'm still there's still something there, which is where these deeper wounds and these deeper blocks and things come in. And it can be on so many different levels. One of the things that I always say, even if it's past life, if it's showing up now, it's so that it can be reconciled, healed, cleared, forgiven now.
Right.
So what do you think, I'm trying to figure, I like to keep these at about half an hour, and I'm like, we're already at
Yes.
20 minutes. I'm like,
I know,
what questions do I really want to ask before we get done with this? What would be like, if you could give your best advice to um, somebody you were getting ready to work with today? And again, I'm not really sure if you said, like, what are your offers right now? Like, who are you working
Oh,
with
yeah.
right now?
So I currently work with, well, it's kind of anyone in the transformational space. So I
Right.
work with coaches, consultants, and therapists who want to grow their practice, who want to bring in clients more consistently and want to do it differently. They don't want to do all the traditional methods of funnels and challenges and the more masculine way. So it's bringing in clients in a more feminine way and sharing their story in a way that's drawing their clients in. So we're working on writing and we're working on refining their process and program. So they're getting rid of any imposter syndrome. They're coming in from a very grounded place of what their transformation looked like. So it's a 90-day, I call it business and writing, transformation, because that's what we're doing. We're transforming, their business and their writing, which ultimately really we're transforming them. But
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I love that you say the business and writing, because that is one of the things, like, I know for me personally, that's one of the things I've always struggled with. I seem to have gotten it now. Like, for some
Nice.
reason, finally something clicked and I was like, oh, I think I'm figuring this out finally. But it's like another level, believe it or not. Like, if that's where you're at and you're kind of stuck, it's like, what is the resistance that you're coming against?
Yeah,
And how
right.
do you find that, and how do you work through it? So what is your first, like, what it would be if somebody was sitting here listening to us right now and they're like, oh my God, yes, I'm listening to everything and I'm agreeing with everything. And I've had a similar process and I know that I'm called to do this work. What would be like one little tiny piece of advice that you're like, this is the one thing?
Yes. Well, I would say it's sort of a little bit layered. I would say my biggest thing would be to enter into that space with curiosity instead of criticism. Because when you enter with curiosity instead of criticism, you're allowing for forgiveness. When we enter with criticism, we're coming from judgment. Something's wrong with you. Why haven't you figured it out? You're cursed, basically, right? When you enter in with curiosity, I'm curious, why is this happening? I wonder what I can understand here, and really seek to understand. You're opening up to the possibility of forgiveness, which means you're letting go of the judgments and the criticisms and the condemnation, which usually is all about we're condemning ourselves, right? So I think it's just being able to come from a space of compassion towards yourself and your process and your journey.
Yes, I love that. So I love how much we resonate, because I do that with my clients a lot. It's like, what if you just looked at it and went, huh, I wonder.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So
I wonder what this is. Huh.
Right.
When you take off the pressure of having to be like, I have to figure out exactly what this is right now in this moment. And it's so powerful, again, that self-compassion and self-love and self-awareness, that I think a lot of times as entrepreneur. Okay, one of the hardest things that I know that my clients come against, and I'm thinking that yours probably will relate. And for those of you watching, if this is you, like, give us a thumbs up or something, because is trying to take time off and trying to do something that's not productive. Like, I think that's another thing that we really have to be working through right now is productivity doesn't equal worth.
Yes.
You are worthy already. You already are a divine being. You're already exactly what you need to be in this moment. And then how do you still just show up and then give yourself a break? Because one of the things that I've noticed a lot too is the ebb and flow of being in this space where you can sit back and contract and rest and do those things, versus the times that it feels good to go out and be expansive and do the work. Right.
Right. Well, I
So,
think too, it's also understanding, and we kind of mentioned a little bit, and I think one of your headlines was inner guidance, right? So it's like trusting that there is a deeper, wise self that's guiding you, and that guidance might be go lay in the grass, go, for a hike. And that is, I had that so many times in my experience too, is that when I do that, it's funny how you will see something shift in your business. But you can't do it thinking it's going to shift your business, right? So you're doing it because, yes, like I feel called to go out and spend time in nature, but you're not attached to the outcome. Like, oh, if I go spend time in nature, I'll get a client, because then it won't work, right? It's like I'm called to, like, relieve my soul, right? and just rest. And in that place of rest, that's when the amazing ideas come. That's when you are more, you're receptive. You're like, I'm open. I have time for more.
Yeah.
And then clients can come in such beautiful ways versus the like, I have to force it. I have to work. I have to always be thinking about my business, because then actually you're repelling clients, honestly. So.
Right. Because you're trying too hard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Which is,
and you don't have space for more if you're already like, go. Like how are you? Yeah.
Yeah. It's amazing. And that's so true, especially like right now we're getting ready to move into Cancer, which is a little bit more emotional and going within and those kind of things. And I feel like that can show up again, coming back to the idea of imposter syndrome, like showing up that way. How does that relate to you, and how do you feel into that, and what does that feel like, and does it feel good? Right? Like, here's the other thing too. Right. Even if you feel like, okay, your coach is saying you should go, just take a break and take some time off. How does it feel to you? Because if it doesn't feel good, you've got to trust that. So I really do feel like it's amazing talking about the inner voice versus what we think we need to do and the way we think we need to show up, and how that really is where the imposter syndrome, I feel like that's where it comes from, is the disconnect in those two.
Right. And it's like you said, it's like grace, right? Embodying grace. It's like, it's like the inner critic and you feel pressure in negativity and like heaviness, then that's not the inner guidance. You're like, ooh, I'm open, and like things still feel like more spacious, and I feel more creative. That's when like, okay, that's inner guidance. Like, and you can feel like, is it forcing or is it allowing? Right.
Yeah. It's such a big difference. There was something I was just watching or listening to. What was I doing? Was I listening to it or watching it? And it was so brilliant the way it was. I can't remember now where I saw this. But it was like the difference between thinking about something and being aware of something, and just the difference. Because that's one of the things, I know you and I have talked about this, like the inner chatter and the mind chatter and what you're thinking and how that can really, the way you think can be adjusted once you become aware of it. And once you can understand the beliefs behind even what you're thinking. Right. And then how, if you're trying to think yourself through those thoughts, it just creates this other spiral of creating more of that, chaos and confusion, versus if you can just step back for a minute and be like, okay, I am aware that this is a pattern that I see. I'm aware that this is a belief. It takes a little bit of the pressure off and you experience it in just a different way. And I feel like that alone kind of gives us some clarity and helps us work with that. It gives a different level of understanding to the imposter syndrome even itself.
Totally. And one thing I've been leaning into this, it's been almost 3 weeks now, is changing how I look at gratitude. So I started, it's called the Miracle Project. I started every morning, you write, I'm grateful that, not I feel grateful, not I am grateful for, it's just I'm grateful that. And so those things like you talked about, I'm grateful that I'm annoyed that I'm stuck in this pattern. So it's like it's kind of like, count everything as joy, but it changes it. It changes the emotional charge. It's like, oh, I'm grateful that I'm annoyed.
Yeah.
Because usually we're judging that we're annoyed, right? So it's like, it shifts the energy around it, which then allows you like a deeper awareness, because when we're in judgment and criticism, we block, creativity. So it's, having an awareness, but then entering into the awareness of it's okay. I'm grateful that I've been wrestling with this for my whole life.
Which sounds so backwards, right? Like normally you're like, what the F? Like, really? You're grateful for that? But it's funny because I love how you just said that, because it's actually a brain hack, even though I don't know if people would catch that. But like, when you allow yourself to think about something differently or switch the perspective, it makes your brain, it's like, wait a minute, I don't know this pattern. Yeah. So it causes your brain to actually be like, wait, let me think about this in a different way, which can help loosen up some of the limiting beliefs and things that we have that are stuck so solid.
Yeah, so
Because it
true.
interrupts the pattern, which again, I love that because I like to look at everything from the whole perspective, meaning physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and then galactic energy. Of course, for me, I love all the astrology and the galaxy and the way that right now, like all of the excess solar energy that we have and the neutrinos that are coming in the planet, and like how we're physically feeling that as well, but then how that physical sensation can trigger emotional sensation, which can trigger your mindset, which can trigger spirituality. And it can go in any which direction. So it's really about looking at everything from that whole picture. But gosh, I love everything about the conversation that we're having today. I'm like, we could probably go in so many different ways. Tell us really quickly. I know that you had a free offer, correct?
Yes.
And I have that in the instructions, but tell us a little bit about that. And then again, you guys, if you have any questions, let us know. And those of you catching the replay, you can always just put #replay and drop a question. Kori and I both will see those comments later. We can check in a few days and see if there's any questions that didn't get answered as well. This is not a normal time for me to come on. So I'm sure there's going to be more people that catch the replay.
Perfect. Yeah. So I recorded a training on, I call it divine client attraction, because I do believe that, and I imagine you share this belief, that we're matched with certain clients. Like our path and our experiences are matched with certain clients to help them with their path and their experiences. So I did a training about, what does that look like to be like in that energetic, emotional heart and mind space to attract clients versus like having to go, fishing, right? And try to change the bait by changing your strategy or changing your tactic. It's like being receptive to, putting your message out in a way that attracts the clients to come to want to work with you because they are a match for you. So it's just a video training. And then attached to that, I also designed a divine sales, like kind of empowering conversation, because a lot of times with sales, like I mentioned, it doesn't feel very empowering. Either sometimes you've had experiences where you've been bullied, or you felt like there was like the emotional response versus the sort of more intellectual empowered response. So I shared, some questions that you might get asked on a sales call that might trigger you, like what, I don't have that money, or why should I invest, or I can do it on my own, or, our national defense mechanisms, and how to, answer those questions from a very empowered space. So from not judgment, not bullying, and not, having them have an emotional reaction, is just entering into the space of let's talk more about that and be able to help, because really sales is the first step in transformation, right? So helping them choose from a higher state of being versus out of fear and limitation and lack. So that's also part of that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Because that comes into it again. It's so funny to me, like how all of these themes are so intertwined, even with the time that we're in, right? Like, so this, if nothing else, I'm like, okay, this is another little like God wink saying you are here in this time on purpose for this mission to do what you're called to do. So thank you so much, Kori, for coming on today and being a guest. For those of you guys watching and those of you seeing the replay, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you took the tiny little nugget. Every time you get some tiny little nugget, it just can open you up to the next paradigm or the next idea or whatever. And again, drop questions, sending you guys lots of love, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks everyone.